poor Waitress stopped a truck for a man with neck tattoos and murder in his eyes. The next morning, she was fired and humiliated in front of a packed dining room. She had no idea the dangerous stranger she sheltered that night was standing in the doorway, watching it all unfold. And when he finally stepped inside, her cruel manager would learn exactly who owns this city. The highway was drowning. Ludovina Trujillo fought the steering wheel of her battered red Chevy pickup as rain hammered the windshield like fists. The wipers screamed across the glass, barely carving out seconds of visibility before the storm swallowed the road again. She was bone-tired, her waitress uniform sticking to her back, her tips for the night barely enough to cover gas. All she wanted was her bed. Then her headlights caught him. A figure walking on the shoulder of the highway. Not stumbling. Not waving for help. Just walking with terrifying purpose through the deluge, black suit plastered to his frame, a leather briefcase clutched in one hand. As she slowed, the headlights revealed more. Neck tattoos crawling up from his collar. Hands marked with ink. A face carved from stone and exhaustion, rain streaming down sharp cheekbones. His eyes caught her headlights and reflected back something cold. Something that made her foot hover over the gas pedal. Every instinct screamed, "Keep driving." But she saw the way he gripped that briefcase like it was the only thing tethering him to the earth. How his shoulders, broad as they were, looked ready to collapse. He wasn't waving down cars because he knew no one would stop. Not for a man who looked like that. Ludovina pulled over. She rolled the window down halfway, rain immediately soaking her arm. The smell of wet asphalt and something metallic filled the cab. "You're going to die out here," she called over the storm. The man turned. His eyes locked onto hers, searching for something. Threat. Pity. She wasn't sure what he found, but after a long moment, he moved toward the truck. She unlocked the passenger door. He slid in, bringing the rain with him, water pooling on the worn seat. The briefcase settled between his feet. Neither of them spoke. The heater rattled to life, pushing out barely warm air. She pulled back onto the highway, hands tight on the wheel. "There's coffee," she said finally, nodding to the thermos wedged between them. "It's not good, but it's hot." His voice, when it came, was rough as gravel. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere dry." She didn't ask questions. Didn't ask about the tattoos or the briefcase or why a man in an expensive suit was walking a highway in a storm that could kill him. She just drove through sheets of rain while he drank her terrible coffee in silence. When she pulled up to a dark building 40 minutes later, he studied it through the window. "This is where you live. This is where you're safe tonight." She killed the engine. "You coming?" He followed her inside the small safe house she knew about, a place her cousin kept for workers passing through. She handed him a towel, poured instant soup into a chipped mug, turned on the space heater. "You should sleep," she said, gesturing to the couch. "Storm's supposed to last till morning." He didn't argue. Just set the briefcase beside him like a sleeping guard dog and closed his eyes. Ludovina sat by the window, watching rain turn to drizzle, then to mist. Her reflection in the glass looked tired but calm. She had done what she could. Before dawn, she slipped out, locking the door behind her. The couch was empty when she left. The towel folded. No note. She stepped into the gray morning and drove toward work, not knowing the man with the death stare would walk back into her life in a matter of hours. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same. The breakfast rush was in full chaos when Ludovina burst through the back door of Luigi's Trattoria, 15 minutes late. Her hair was still damp. Her shoes squeaked on the tile. The kitchen smelled like burnt garlic and desperation. Marco Rossi was waiting. Trujillo. His voice cracked across the dining room like a whip. Conversations died. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Even the kitchen went silent. He stormed toward her, his stained white shirt tight across his gut, his face red with the kind of rage that came from petty power. "You think you run on your own schedule? You think I'm running a charity here?" Ludovina's throat tightened. "Marco, I'm sorry. There was a storm. And someone needed. Someone needed. He laughed, ugly and loud. Let me tell you what I need. I need employees who show up. Not bleeding hearts who think the world stops for their good deeds. A woman at table 6 whispered to her husband. The busboy looked away. Ludovina felt every eye in the room on her. I've worked here 4 years, she said, voice steady despite her shaking hands. You know I'm never. You're fired, Marco spat, ripping the apron from around her waist. Get out. Now. I don't need excuses. I need someone reliable. He threw the apron at her feet. The silence was suffocating. Ludovina bent slowly, picked up the apron, and folded it with shaking hands. She laid it on the counter with all the dignity she could summon. As she turned toward the door, Marco called after her, voice dripping with satisfaction. Maybe next time you'll learn. Nice girls finish last. A few customers looked down at their plates. One older woman shook her head sadly. The bell above the door chimed as Ludovina stepped outside into the damp morning. The rain had stopped, but the cold cut through her uniform. Behind her, inside the restaurant, Marco straightened his collar and grinned at the kitchen staff. That's how you handle lazy workers. Now get back to it. We've got a busy day. He didn't see the black sedan that pulled up across the street. He didn't see the man with neck tattoos and a briefcase stepping out. He didn't see Johnny Trentini adjust his cufflinks, look up at the faded Luigi's Trattoria sign, and smile like a wolf who just found the shepherd sleeping. Ludovina was halfway down the block when she heard the bell chime again behind her. She didn't look back. But she should have. Because the man she saved was walking through that door, and Marco Rossi was about to learn that some debts get paid in ways you can't survive. The highway was a river trying to drown her. Ludovina's hands ached from gripping the wheel, knuckles white as the Chevy's engine whined against the wind. Rain didn't just fall. It attacked, slamming the windshield in waves that made the wipers useless. She could barely see 10 feet ahead, just the fractured glow of her headlights cutting through sheets of water. Her shift at Luigi's had run 2 hours over. Her feet throbbed. Her uniform smelled like fryer grease and someone else's perfume. The tips in her pocket, $23 and some change, would cover gas and maybe eggs for breakfast. Maybe. She just wanted to get home. Crawl into bed. Forget that the rent was due in 4 days and she was $100 short. Then she saw him. At first, just a shape in the darkness. A shadow moving with unnatural purpose along the highway shoulder. No stumbling, no hesitation. Just a man walking through a storm that could kill him. Her headlights swept over him as she passed. Black suit. Soaked through. Leather briefcase gripped in one hand like a weapon. And when the light hit his face, tattoos crawling up his neck, dark ink stark against pale skin. His jaw was set, his eyes straight ahead, rain streaming down his face like he didn't even feel it. Ludovina's breath caught. Everything about him screamed danger. The tattoos. The suit. The way he moved like he owned the storm instead of running from it. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Mind your business, Mija. People like that, they're not your problem. She pressed the gas. Past him. Watched him disappear in her rearview mirror. But her hands were already turning the wheel. She couldn't do it. Couldn't just leave him out there. It didn't matter what he looked like or what those tattoos meant. She'd seen death before. Knew what it looked like when someone was walking toward it. And that man, whoever he was, wasn't going to make it another mile. The truck shuddered as she pulled onto the shoulder, hazards blinking weakly through the rain. She rolled the window down halfway. Rain immediately soaked her arm, cold and sharp. You're going to die out here, she shouted over the storm. The man stopped. Turned slowly. His eyes found hers through the downpour. Dark, calculating, dangerous. For a moment, she thought he might just keep walking. That he'd rather die than accept help from a stranger in a beat-up truck. Then he moved toward her. Each step deliberate. Water splashing around his expensive shoes. Up close, she could see the ink more clearly. Symbols she didn't recognize. words in a language she couldn't read. His face was all sharp angles and exhaustion, the kind that came from something worse than a long day. He stood outside her window, rain pouring off him. Waiting. Ludovina reached over and unlocked the passenger door. The sound was loud in the storm, a choice being made, a line being crossed. The man opened the door and slid inside, bringing the rain and the cold and something else with him. Something that made the truck feel smaller. More dangerous. The briefcase settled between his feet with a heavy thunk. Neither of them spoke. Ludovina shifted into gear and pulled back onto the highway, her heart hammering against her ribs. The wipers screamed. The heater rattled to life. And beside her, the man with the death stare stared straight ahead into the storm, like he was already planning what came next. The silence in the cab was suffocating. Ludovina kept her eyes on the road, hands locked at 10 and 2, feeling every inch of space between them like a live wire. Water dripped from his suit onto her worn seat, pooling on the floorboard. The briefcase sat between his feet like a sleeping dog, expensive leather, brass locks, the kind of thing that held either money or secrets. Maybe both. She could feel him watching her. Not staring. Just observing with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. Like he was cataloging everything, the duct tape on her dashboard, the rosary hanging from the rearview mirror, the way her hands trembled slightly on the wheel. The heater coughed warm air that smelled like burnt dust. Outside, the storm raged on, turning the world into nothing but rain and darkness and the hypnotic rhythm of the wipers. Ludovina reached for the thermos wedged between the seats. "There's coffee," she said, her voice too loud in the quiet. "It's not good, but it's hot." She held it out without looking at him. For a moment, he didn't move. Then his hand, marked with more tattoos, symbols that wrapped around his knuckles like armor, took the thermos from her. Their fingers didn't touch, but she felt the heat of him anyway. He unscrewed the cap. Steam rose in the cold cab. He drank, and she watched from the corner of her eye as he closed his eyes briefly, like that terrible gas station coffee was the best thing he'd tasted in days. "Thank you," he said finally. His voice was rough, textured like gravel, but there was something underneath it. Not warmth exactly. Just recognition. Like he understood what it cost her to stop. Ludovina nodded, throat tight. She didn't ask where he'd come from. Didn't ask about the briefcase or the tattoos or why a man in a $1,000 suit was walking a highway in a storm. Those weren't her questions to ask. Instead, she took a back road she knew, one that cut through farmland and abandoned lots. Somewhere away from traffic. Away from cameras. She didn't know why that felt important, but it did. His eyes dropped to her uniform, lingering on the name tag pinned crooked above her pocket. "Ludovina," he said, testing the name. Not mocking it. Just remembering it. She glanced at him. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, they weren't empty. There was something there, buried deep. Pain, maybe. Or exhaustion that went bone deep. And when he looked at her, really looked, she had the strangest feeling he was seeing something she tried to keep hidden. The sadness. The fear. The weight of carrying everything alone. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Somewhere safe," she said. "For tonight, at least." He studied her for another moment, then nodded once and turned back to the window. The briefcase stayed clutched between his knees, his hand resting on top of it like a promise. Or a threat. They drove on through the storm, two strangers bound together by circumstance and rain, while lightning split the sky and thunder rolled like distant artillery. Ludovina didn't know his name yet. Didn't know that the man sitting in her truck was a king without a kingdom, a ghost the underworld thought was already dead. She just knew he needed help. And she'd never been able to turn away from that. The morning came gray and unforgiving. Ludovina's Chevy coughed to life on the third try, the engine protesting like it knew what kind of day was waiting. The storm had passed, but it left the city drowning. Streets flooded at every intersection. Traffic lights blinked uselessly. Cars crawled bumper to bumper through water that came up past the wheel wells. She checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Luigi's. Her stomach dropped. She pressed the gas, weaving through side streets, taking shortcuts that added 10 minutes because the main roads were impassable. Her uniform from last night was wrinkled, still faintly damp. She hadn't slept. Couldn't stop thinking about the man with the tattoos, the way he'd looked at her name tag like he was committing it to memory. When she finally pulled into the restaurant lot, she was 15 minutes late. The breakfast rush was in full swing. Through the window, she could see every table packed, the kitchen staff moving like their lives depended on it. Marco's life depended on making her pay for it. She pushed through the back door breathless, her shoes still wet from wading through a flooded parking lot. The kitchen was chaos, orders shouting, pans clattering, the smell of bacon and burnt toast thick in the air. Trujillo. Marco's voice cut through everything like a chainsaw. Conversations at the tables stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze. Even the cook turned from the griddle, eyes wide. He came at her from the dining room, his white shirt yellowed under the arms, stained with grease and sweat. His face was red, bloated with the kind of rage that came from somewhere deeper than tardiness. This was about power. About reminding everyone who held it. "You think you run on your own time," he shouted, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "You think I'm running some charity operation here?" Ludovina's hands went up, placating. "Marco, I'm so sorry. The storm flooded." "I don't care about the storm." He stepped closer, invading her space. She could smell the coffee on his breath, the cigarettes. "Everyone else made it. Everyone except you. Because you think the rules don't apply, right?" "That's not. 4 years you've been here," he spat, voice dripping with contempt. 4 years of showing up with that sad little face, expecting sympathy. "Well, I'm done with it. You know what you are, Trujillo? You're dead weight." Someone gasped at table 6. The busboy turned away, unable to watch. Ludovina felt her throat close. "Please. I need this job. I've never been late before." "You're late today." Marco grabbed her apron, yanked it hard enough that the ties burned across her back. The fabric ripped. He threw it at her feet like garbage. "You're fired. Get out. I don't need your excuses. I need someone reliable." The apron lay between them, crumpled and stained. The room was silent except for the sizzle of the grill. Ludovina bent slowly, picked up the apron with trembling hands, and folded it with all the dignity she had left. She placed it carefully on the counter, refusing to let him see her break. "Maybe next time you'll learn," Marco called after her, playing to his audience now. "Nice girls finish last in this city." A few customers looked away, ashamed. One older man shook his head. But no one spoke. Ludovina walked toward the door, each step measured. The bell chimed when she pushed it open, a small, final sound. Behind her, Marco straightened his shirt and grinned at the kitchen staff. "That's how you run a tight ship. Now move. We've got customers waiting." Outside, Ludovina stood on the sidewalk, the gray morning pressing down on her. She'd done the right thing last night. She was sure of it. But right didn't pay rent. She didn't see the black sedan that pulled up across the street. Didn't see the man with neck tattoos stepping out, briefcase in hand, eyes locked on the restaurant entrance. Didn't see Johnny Trentini smile like a wolf who'd just found his prey. The bell above the door chimed. Every head turned. 3 men walked in like they owned gravity itself. The one in front moved with the kind of calm that came from never having to prove anything. Black suit, perfectly tailored despite yesterday's rain. Neck tattoos visible above his collar. Eyes that scanned the room once and catalogued every exit, every threat, every weakness. Behind him, 2 mountains in dark coats. Bodyguards. The kind that didn't need to flex or posture. Their presence was enough. The breakfast chatter died like someone had cut its throat. Marco was behind the counter, still riding high on his victory, when he looked up and saw them. His smile faltered. Something primitive in his brain recognized danger even if his ego wouldn't admit it yet. Johnny Trentini walked to the center of the dining room and stopped. The silence was absolute. Even the kitchen had gone quiet. "I'm looking for the owner," he said. His voice was calm, conversational, but it carried to every corner of the room. Marco forced a laugh, puffing his chest. "I manage this place. Whatever you need, I can." "I didn't ask for the manager." Johnny's eyes were flat, unreadable. "I asked for the owner. He's not here right now. But I have full authority. Call him." It wasn't a request. Marco's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. The call lasted 30 seconds. When he hung up, his face had gone pale. "He'll be here in 10 minutes. Good." Johnny walked to the nearest booth and sat. His guards positioned themselves by the door. No one moved. No one ate. No one even seemed to breathe. 9 minutes later, an elderly man in a cardigan rushed through the door, out of breath, confused. "What's this about?" Marco said. He stopped when he saw Johnny. Recognition flickered across his face. Fear followed close behind. Johnny stood, pulled a leather briefcase from under the table, the same one Ludovina had seen last night, and set it on the table. He opened it. Stacks of cash. Bound and neat. Enough to buy silence. Enough to buy anything. "I want to buy this restaurant," Johnny said simply. "Today. Now." The owner's mouth opened. Closed. I'm not sure it's for sale." "Everything's for sale." Johnny pushed the briefcase forward. "That's 300,000. Cash. For the deed, the inventory, and the name. I'll have my lawyers handle the paperwork by tomorrow." The old man stared at the money like it might bite him. His hands trembled as he reached for it, then stopped. "Why?" Johnny's eyes moved to Marco, who had gone white as bone. "Because I'm settling a debt." The owner looked between them, understanding dawning. He nodded slowly, reached into his jacket, and pulled out his phone. "I'll call my lawyer. We can do this today." Marco found his voice, shrill and desperate. "You can't just. This is insane." "It's business," Johnny said. Then he turned, his eyes sweeping the room until they found the door. The morning light coming through. And beyond it, the sidewalk where Ludovina had walked away minutes ago. "Someone get her," he said quietly. One of the bodyguards nodded and stepped outside. Marco's face went from white to red. "Get who? What is this? You can't just. The woman you fired." Johnny's voice was ice. "Ludovina Trujillo." The room was silent except for Marco's ragged breathing. 3 minutes later, the bell chimed again. Ludovina stood in the doorway, confusion painted across her face. She looked from the bodyguard who'd found her to the frozen restaurant to the man from last night sitting calmly in a booth. Their eyes met. Recognition. Then shock. Johnny stood. "Miss Trujillo. Thank you for coming back." She opened her mouth. No words came. He gestured to Marco, who looked like he might be sick. "You helped me last night when no one else would. You gave me shelter, coffee, dignity." He paused. "I don't forget debts like that." The owner returned, phone to his ear, nodding rapidly. Yes, we can finalize by this afternoon." Johnny's eyes never left Ludovina. "This restaurant is mine now. And you're going to run it." Marco exploded. "This is insane. You can't." Johnny finally looked at him. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You're fired," he said simply. Then he smiled. "Actually, no. You're the new dishwasher. Report to the kitchen." Ludovina's legs felt weak. I don't understand." "You will," Johnny said. He pulled out a chair at his table. "Sit. We have a lot to discuss." The bell chimed as customers began quietly leaving, sensing this was no longer their business. Marco stood frozen, his world crumbling around him, finally understanding that he'd made an enemy of the wrong man. And Ludovina sat down across from a stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore, wondering if she'd saved his life last night or if he was about to save hers. The kitchen in the back was a different world from the dining room. Johnny stood beside the industrial sink, arms crossed, while Marco stared at the mountain of greasy plates and burnt pans like they were his own grave. The breakfast rush had left behind a disaster: crusted egg yolk, congealed bacon fat, coffee stains that had baked onto ceramic. "I don't understand," Marco said, his voice small now, stripped of all its earlier venom. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious." Johnny's tone was pleasant, almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. "You fired Miss Trujillo for being 15 minutes late. Threw her apron on the floor. Called her dead weight." He paused. "In front of a room full of people." Marco's face went red. "That was just... I was managing. Someone has to maintain standards." "Standards?" Johnny nodded slowly. "That's interesting. Because from what I've learned in the last hour, you've been skimming from the register for 2 years, shorting the kitchen staff on their paychecks. And you've been selling shifts to undocumented workers, then threatening to report them when they complain." The color drained from Marco's face. "So here's what's going to happen," Johnny continued, his voice never rising above calm. "You're going to work every single dish that comes through this kitchen. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. You're going to scrub until your hands crack. And you're going to do it for minimum wage." He leaned in slightly. "Because I don't forget debts either. And you owe this place a lot more than you think." Marco opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes darted to the exit. One of the bodyguards shifted his weight, blocking the doorway. "Or," Johnny said quietly, "you can walk out that door right now. But if you do, I'll make some phone calls. And people will be very interested to know about your little side businesses." Marco looked at the dishes. At Johnny. At the impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. He picked up the dish soap with shaking hands. "Good," Johnny said. "Start with the burnt pans." In the dining room, Ludovina sat at the booth, her whole world tilting sideways. The owner had left 20 minutes ago, paperwork signed, a check in his pocket and relief on his face. The remaining customers had paid and scattered. It was just her and the quiet now. Johnny emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a cloth. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a set of keys, the restaurant keys, brass and worn from years of use. He set them on the table in front of her. "These are yours now," he said. Ludovina stared at them like they were a bomb. "I can't. I don't know how to run a restaurant." "You've been running it for 4 years. You just never got credit for it." He sat across from her, his presence somehow less threatening now, though no less intense. "Everyone here knows you're the reason this place worked. The customers. The kitchen staff. Even Marco knew it, which is why he hated you." Her hands trembled as she reached for the keys. The metal was warm. "Real. I don't understand why you're doing this," she whispered. Johnny was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "Last night, I was walking that highway because I had nowhere else to go. Everyone I trusted had turned on me. I was ready to disappear." He met her eyes. "You stopped. You didn't see the tattoos or the suit or whatever story you could have invented. You just saw someone who needed help." Ludovina's throat tightened. "That's rare," he continued. "Especially in this city. Especially for someone like me." He gestured around the restaurant. "So this is me returning the favor. The only way I know how. By buying me a restaurant? By giving you what you've earned." He stood, straightened his jacket. "Run it however you want. But if you need advice, run it like a home, not a business. Feed people like their family. Pay your staff fairly. Make it the kind of place you would have wanted to work for." She clutched the keys, tears threatening. What if I fail? You won't. He said it with such certainty that she almost believed him. And if you need anything, anything at all, you know how to find me now. From the kitchen came the sound of running water and Marco's quiet, defeated cursing. Johnny smiled faintly. I'll check in tomorrow. Make sure our dishwasher is adjusting. He walked toward the door, his guards falling in behind him. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. Thank you, he said. For the coffee. Then he was gone. Ludovina sat alone in the empty restaurant, keys in her hand, her old apron still folded on the counter. Outside, the grey morning was beginning to brighten. And for the first time in years, she felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. 3 weeks later, Luigi's trattoria was alive again. The changes were subtle at first. Ludovina brought in her grandmother's recipes. Real mole that simmered for hours, handmade tortillas pressed fresh each morning, pozole that made customers close their eyes on the first spoonful. She repainted the walls a warm terracotta, replaced the fluorescent lights with something softer. Hired back the staff Marco had bullied away and paid them what they were worth. The regulars noticed. Then they brought friends. Then those friends became regulars. By week 3, there was a wait list for weekend brunch. But in the back, in the humid hell of the dish pit, Marco Rossi was rotting from the inside out. His hands were raw, cracked from industrial soap and scalding water. His back ached from hunching over the sink 12 hours a day. But worse than the physical pain was the humiliation. Watching Ludovina glide through the dining room, customers smiling at her, staff actually laughing in the kitchen like work could be something other than survival. It ate at him. Consumed him. So he started small. A plate slipped from his soapy hands. Ceramic shattered across the tile. Accident, he muttered when the sous chef glared at him. But the next day, 3 more plates. Then a serving platter. Then the good wine glasses that Ludovina had just ordered. When that didn't slow things down, he got creative. He'd wait until the kitchen was chaos, orders flying, everyone focused on their stations. Then he'd drift near the stove. A palm full of salt dumped into the soup pot when no one was looking. Pepper in the mole. He'd grab finished plates heading to the pass and drag his dirty dishwater rag across the rim. The complaints started trickling in. The soup was inedible. The presentation was sloppy. Customers who'd been raving the week before were suddenly disappointed. Ludovina noticed. How could she not? She tasted everything now, double-checked every plate, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. The mistakes were random, unpredictable. A perfect dish 1 minute, ruined the next. The staff started second-guessing themselves. The sous chef grew paranoid. The line cooks snapped at each other. And Marco smiled in his dish pit, hands deep in greasy water, watching the chaos spread like infection. During the dinner rush on Friday, he waited until Ludovina was in the dining room handling a complaint. Then he grabbed the 50-pound bag of salt and dumped half of it into the vat of pozole that had been simmering since dawn, the signature dish, the one that had people driving across the city. He stirred it in carefully, making sure it dissolved. When he turned around, one of the new cooks was staring at him from the walk-in, eyes wide. Marco's smile never wavered. "Tell anyone," he said quietly, "and I'll make sure immigration hears about your cousin in the back." The cook looked away. That night, 12 customers sent back the pozole. 1 woman actually spit it out. Ludovina stood in the kitchen, ladle in hand, tasting the ruin of her grandmother's recipe, and something inside her cracked. She turned slowly, scanning the kitchen. Everyone was busy, heads down, avoiding her eyes. Everyone except Marco, who was scrubbing a pan in the dish pit, humming softly to himself. Their eyes met across the steam and chaos. And Ludovina knew. Ludovina stayed late that night, long after the last customer left and the staff clocked out. She told herself she was doing inventory, checking the books. But really, she was watching. The restaurant was dark except for the security lights in the kitchen. She sat in the office, barely more than a closet with a desk, door cracked, lights off, waiting. At 11:47, she heard it. The back door opening. Footsteps moving through the kitchen with practiced stealth. Marco. She watched through the crack as he made his way to the wine storage, a locked cage near the walk-in. He pulled out a key, her key, the one that had gone missing 2 days ago, and opened it. Started loading bottles into a canvas bag. The expensive ones. The Barolos and Brunellos that Johnny had personally selected, the ones that cost more than Marco used to make in a week. Ludovina's hands clenched. She should confront him. Fire him properly. Call the police. But then Marco pulled out his phone. The screen glow lit his face as he stepped into the alley, bag slung over his shoulder. She crept to the window, heart hammering. "Yeah, it's me," Marco said, voice low and sharp. "I've got more. Same price as last time." A pause. "No, I'm telling you, he's here almost every day. Always the back booth. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, like clockwork." Ludovina's blood went cold. "Trentini," Marco said, and the name hit her like a fist. "Yeah, the Johnny Trentini. I'm looking at his security guy right now through the window." He laughed, ugly and bitter. "You want him? I'll gift wrap him for the Morettas. Just make sure I'm paid before this place burns." The world tilted. Marco wasn't just stealing wine. He was selling information. Selling Johnny to his enemies. Whoever the Morettas were, whatever that meant. And burning the restaurant was part of the plan. She stumbled back from the window, hand over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Marco finished his call, pocketed the phone, and disappeared into the alley with his stolen goods. Ludovina stood in the dark office, shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to stay out of it, to pretend she hadn't seen anything. This was mob business. Crime family business. The kind of thing that got people killed. But Johnny had saved her. Given her everything. And now someone was coming for him because of her restaurant. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands. Found the number he'd given her that first day. "Only for emergencies," he'd said. Her thumb hovered over the call button. This was an emergency. This was life and death. She pressed it. The phone rang once. Twice. "Ludovina." His voice was calm, but alert. Like he'd been waiting. "What's wrong?" She took a breath, steadied herself. "We need to talk. Tonight. It's about Marco." A pause. "I'm listening. Not on the phone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone's coming for you. And I think I know when." The silence on the other end was heavy, dangerous. "Stay there," Johnny said finally. "Lock the doors. I'm 10 minutes away." The line went dead. Ludovina locked the front door, checked the back twice, and sat in the dark dining room with her grandmother's rosary wrapped around her knuckles. Praying she'd done the right thing. Praying she hadn't just signed her own death warrant. The restaurant was tomb quiet at 2 a.m. Ludovina sat in the office, ledger open, numbers blurring in front of her exhausted eyes. She'd sent Johnny's men home an hour ago after telling them everything. Johnny himself had left around midnight, his face unreadable after hearing about Marco's calls to the Morettas. "We'll handle it," he'd said. "You should go home." But she couldn't. This was her place now. If something was going to happen, she needed to be here. The sound of metal scraping metal jolted her awake. She dozed off at the desk. Now she sat upright, heart pounding, listening. The noise came from the kitchen, deliberate, careful. Someone who didn't want to be heard. She grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and crept toward the kitchen entrance. Through the porthole window in the door, she saw him. Marco, dressed in black, crouched beside the industrial stove. He had the access panel open, tools spread around him. And in the beam of his own flashlight, she saw what he was doing. Disconnecting the gas line, leaving just enough connection that it would leak slowly, invisibly. A timer sat on the floor beside him. Digital. Counting down from 2 hours. Her breath caught. He was going to blow it all up. The restaurant. The evidence. Anyone who happened to be inside. She burst through the door. Marco, stop. He spun, wrench in hand, eyes wild. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The woman he'd humiliated and the man who'd lost everything because of it. You should have stayed home, he said, voice dead calm. You can't do this. I can't. He laughed, standing slowly. You took everything from me. My job. My respect. You brought that monster into our lives and now I'm scrubbing dishes like some immigrant. So you'll kill people? Burn it down. It's already burning. He took a step toward her. The wrench hung at his side like a weapon. The Morettas are coming for Trentini tomorrow. This place is ground zero. I'm just speeding things up. Getting my payout before the war starts. Ludovina backed up. Johnny knows. I told him everything. Marco's face twisted. Then you just killed yourself too. He lunged. She tried to run but he caught her arm, yanked her back. The wrench came up. She screamed, throwing her hands up to protect her face. And then Marco simply stopped. His eyes went wide. The wrench clattered to the floor. Behind him, from the shadows near the walk-in, Johnny Trentini stepped into the light. One hand on Marco's collar, the other holding something small and dark against his ribs. Ludovina, Johnny said calmly, like they were discussing the menu. Go outside. Now. She stumbled backward, unable to look away. Please, Marco whispered, the color draining from his face. Please, I didn't. You tampered with gas lines in a building full of families upstairs, Johnny said softly. You were going to murder people in their sleep. For what? Pride. I'll leave. I'll disappear. You will. Johnny's voice carried no anger. Just finality. Just not the way you planned. Two men emerged from the back office, the bodyguards who'd supposedly left hours ago. They'd been here the whole time. Watching. Waiting. Johnny had known Marco would come. The cameras, Ludovina whispered, understanding. You've been watching the feeds. Every night since you told me. Johnny released Marco into his men's grip. I needed to know how far he'd go. Now they knew. Marco was dragged toward the back door, pleading, promising. His voice getting smaller until the alley door closed and there was only silence. Johnny walked to the stove, studied the disconnected gas line, and calmly began reassembling it with practiced hands. Go home, Ludovina, he said without looking up. This never happened. And Marco never comes back. She didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. The black sedan's taillights disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, taking Marco Rossi with them. Ludovina never asked where they went. Johnny never told her. By sunrise, the gas line was properly reconnected, the tools cleaned and put away, the timer disposed of. The kitchen looked exactly as it had the night before, as if nothing had happened at all. As if Marco had simply evaporated. The next morning, she opened the restaurant like always. When the staff asked where Marco was, she said he'd quit. No one seemed surprised. No one seemed to care. The dish pit got a new worker by lunch, a quiet man who showed up on time and kept his head down. Life moved forward. But Johnny made changes. Within a week, contractors appeared. New security cameras, professional grade, covering every angle. Reinforced locks on all the doors. A panic button installed under the hostess stand, connected directly to Johnny's phone. Just precautions, he said when Ludovina protested the expense. Then came the renovations. New tile in the kitchen. A proper hood system. Fresh paint throughout. He replaced the worn booths with custom leather seating. Installed soft Edison bulbs that made the whole space glow like candlelight. A new sign went up above the door, hand-carved wood with gold lettering, La Salvadora. The Savior. Ludovina cried when she saw it. 1 month after Marco disappeared, the restaurant reopened with a private dinner. Just staff, a few trusted regulars, and Johnny sitting at what had become his table, back corner, facing the door, always aware of the exits. The kitchen hummed with energy. Authentic dishes her grandmother would have been proud of. Wine that didn't come from Marco's stolen inventory. Laughter that felt real instead of forced. Ludovina emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee. The good kind now, imported from Oaxaca, rich and dark. She set one in front of Johnny and slid into the booth across from him. "On the house," she said. He smiled faintly, the expression softening the hard edges of his face. "You know I own half this place now. Partner's privilege, then." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the dining room fill with warmth and conversation. The staff moved with confidence. The food was perfect. Everything Marco had tried to destroy was thriving. "I never thanked you properly," Ludovina said finally. "For all of this." Johnny shook his head. "You stopped for a stranger in a storm. Everything else is just me paying interest on that debt." "Some debt. Some storm." He raised his coffee cup slightly. "To new beginnings." She lifted hers, ceramic clinking softly. "To seeing people instead of monsters. Even when they have neck tattoos?" "Especially then." His laugh was quiet, genuine. Outside, the city moved past their windows, cars and people and the endless chaos of life. But inside La Salvadora, there was peace. Safety. The kind of home neither of them had known they were searching for. Johnny took a sip of coffee, then set it down carefully. "The Moretas are handled, by the way. They won't be a problem." Ludovina didn't ask how. She was learning when not to ask. "And if other problems come?" "They won't." His voice carried absolute certainty. "This place is protected. You're protected. Anyone who doesn't understand that will learn quickly." She believed him. A waitress brought out the evening's first orders. Mole that had simmered all day, tortillas pressed by hand, pozole with all the proper garnishes. Customers breathed in the aromas and smiled like they'd found something they'd been missing. Johnny watched Ludovina move through the dining room, greeting regulars by name, checking on new guests, making sure everyone felt welcome. She'd grown into the role naturally, like she'd been waiting for permission to be who she really was all along. When she returned, he was still watching. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." He picked up his coffee again. "Just thinking that stopping for you was the best decision I've made in years. Stopping for you almost got me killed. And now you run an empire. A restaurant. It's the same thing," he said. "Just with better food." The front door chimed. More customers. The evening rush beginning. Ludovina stood, smoothed her apron, a new one, clean and pressed, with La Salvadora embroidered over the pocket. "Duty calls," she said. "Go." Johnny gestured toward the dining room. "I'll be here." And he would be. Every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. Not as a boss or a benefactor, but as a partner. As the man she'd saved who'd saved her right back. She moved toward the door, then paused. "Johnny." "Yeah." "Thank you. For the coffee that night. And everything after." He nodded once. "Thank you for stopping." The dining room swallowed her up, warmth and conversation and the smell of home cooking. Through the window, the city lights began to glow as evening settled in. And in his corner booth, Johnny Trentini sipped his coffee and smiled. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. He was home.